Hey everybody, Eric Malice, National Test Systems here, Chief Product Officer. So this was supposed to be a recording of our August 23rd webinar regarding adulterant testing, but we had a little technical issue and somehow the recording didn't get made. So I'm going to attempt to recreate this for you guys. I apologize if you were at the original and you kind of like to see the end result of you being there. My apologies. So bear with me in that case anyway. So it also may look a little different from any of you who have been to my previous webinars. Usually you'll see a slideshow, PowerPoint presentation and my little face in the corner. This one is going to have a demonstration included. So we felt it was more important to have the screen real estate dedicated to the visual on the camera more than just a slide to keep your attention with some pertinent information. However, because of this, we did end up with not quite as much information to share with you on screen as we normally would. So we've done this time, there's a section called handouts, and this is the first time we've done handouts with this system, and certainly the first time that we're recording it with the system. So I don't know exactly where to tell you to look for these. I imagine they're going to be on the landing page where you first clicked play on the video. But these handouts, while not necessary, will help you follow along a little bit. I know some people prefer to have a visual aid when they're learning. It's just very helpful sometimes to be able to read it or follow along with the presenter, whatever it might be. So if you would, you'll see handouts number 1 through 4. And basically they are things I'm going to point out while we're doing this. It'll make it a little bit easier. The handout number 1, attachment number 1 is called ALD parameters. And that's basically the list of the different parameters that we're talking about, what each adulterant panel does. The next thing you'll see is number 2, the adulterant controls. That you'll see here, and that's just the color chart that you would find inside your box of cups. That's a way for you to follow along to see when we do the demonstration what the colors might mean. The third thing we have on there, attachment 3, is the creatinine levels, and we're going to refer to this once or twice. You don't need to necessarily keep that one up, but it will provide some background information for some of the things that I'm telling you about creatinine. And then lastly, I went out of turn, but lastly, we have the adulterant color chart, and that's actually this one here, where we're going to actually do the demo, compare the colors that we have, and see what our adulterants are reading, and more importantly, see what those readings might mean. So again, we did a webinar probably about a year ago about adulterants, and that one was really not so much about the adulterant testing. Of course, that was mentioned. It was more about the different ways in which people will adulterate a specimen or provide an invalid specimen. This one is going to be more a demo on how to actually read the adulterants and tell you what each parameter means and what a normal and out of normal range might indicate. So again, it's still in the same category. There's going to be some overlap. If you've been to any of my other webinars, you've heard me talk about creatinine values a million times. We're definitely going to be touching on that today as well. So I apologize if some of the stuff is stuff you've heard from me before, but I think to tie this all together, it's important that we do it this way. So I appreciate your patience. So right now we're going to focus on attachment number 1. Again, that's just the list of the 6 different parameters that we're testing for on an adulterant strip. Now, one quick note before we begin. So adulterant testing has another name, and that is specimen validity testing. In my mind, the big difference between specimen validity testing and adulterant testing, while again, same exact tool, same exact process, everything, is specimen validity is just the condition of the specimen, whereas adulteration, again, in my head, that indicates intent. So usually things that are adulterated mean someone intended to change these things, usually in an effort to make their dirty urine clean. So do keep that in mind. And I think that some of these things, while it can be indicative of either, isn't always going to be a slam dunk. So, and again, I'll break that down as we go further. So let's talk about the first thing on our attachment 1, and that is pH. So pH is a scale or measure of how acidic or alkaloid something is. So for example, something very acidic, like you would use in your pool, muriatic acid, that is a 2 on the pH scale. Something that is highly on the base end of the scale, like chlorine, for example. Again, we're talking about chlorine you would put in your pool. Sorry, South Florida, pool on the brain still. If we're talking about chlorine, that ends up around between 11 and 13 on the pH scale. So you've got your acids at a really low number, you've got your bases at a really high number, and you've got water, pure, clean water at number 7, smack dab in the middle of that pH scale. Now, human urine does have a range from, I believe it's 7 to 9, but my page is not quite others. Between 4 and 9 is a normal range for human urine's pH. So basically, it is pretty much straddling that neutral. It does lean a little acidic. Of course, as we eat more acidic foods, that has a tendency to change it as well, but it still reliably stays within that 7 to 9 range. So typically, if someone is going to drink a bunch of water, for example, that's not really going to affect your pH. If somebody's going to try and drink bleach or add bleach to their specimen, yeah, that will absolutely move the needle on the pH scale. So that's an excellent measure, mainly of intentional adulteration. All right, next, number 2, we have specific gravity. Specific gravity is basically how thick or how viscous a liquid is. Again, with specific gravity, there is a normal human range of 1.003 to 1.030. And this, more than anything, is a measure of dilution versus concentration. So as you see that specific gravity number go down or get lower, it leans more toward indicating that the specimen has been diluted, either by someone drinking a lot of water or somehow sneaking in water addition into their specimen that they've given you. So with specific gravity, or with dilution in general, and again, we'll get to this next with creatinine, but with specific gravity or dilution specifically, it doesn't necessarily prove the intent of someone to try and beat the test. So while it may not be an adulterated specimen, there's still the possibility that it's not a valid specimen regardless. Maybe they just drank a lot of water that day, hydrated really well that day, whatever it was to bring that specific gravity level down. It doesn't always tell the whole story of someone trying to beat a test or not. It might just indicate somebody drinking a lot of water. So keep that in mind. Next one we have on our list is creatinine. And creatinine, if you're unfamiliar, is a waste product of creatine. It's basically what creatine turns into as your body rebuilds muscle. Usually somebody who works out and is trying to build muscle will have a slightly higher creatinine level because their muscle is rebuilding, causing more of that creatine to transition into creatinine and be voided through the urine. So creatinine is probably the best measure of dilution versus concentration. So it's really important to do as you're testing people. You kind of want to make it, if you're not actually notating what you're reading on the adulteration results, at least kind of make a mental note of these things so you can get patterns from people. In other words, if somebody comes in, every time they give you a specimen, the creatinine looks nice, dark purple on the chart, and then one day they come in and it's really barely purple, maybe even a little bit off white. That's a big change. That's something you should be, at least, if not suspicious of, be aware of, be cognizant of, because it could indicate that you're dealing with a change for some reason. Again, it doesn't prove that they're trying to beat the test or anything like that. But it might at least suggest that the specimen you're trying to test is not valid, and the results that you're expecting to get, you're not going to get. And another thing about creatinine, I'll touch it again a little bit, but there is basically a cutoff that most legal facilities, most people use 20 milligrams per deciliter as the baseline, and anything below that is considered a diluted specimen. And that's good. I mean, it's nice to have, a solid line to use. But again, going back to my previous statement, it's more important to kind of see the trends of the people that are bringing you to specimens, your participants, your patients, whatever they might be. You want to kind of get an idea over time if there's really any changes. And another thing, and this is the big deal, if you're going to go now to attachment 3, which is my creatinine level average chart. So with creatinine, if you look at this chart, you'll pick somebody, let's say 30 years old. Let's just use a white male. This chart goes into breaking it down by some ethnicities as well. And it looks like the average or the mean urinary creatinine for most people is about 140. So let's say somebody comes in and you can't quite tell if it is above or below that 20 milligrams per deciliter, that hard floor that we just set as a diluted specimen. Let's say you can't quite tell if it's above or below that. Well, if it's supposed to be at 140 and it's down near 20, it's a pretty diluted specimen already. It may not meet the legal definition, if that even is such a thing, but it is something that you need to be aware of. And if the results are something you're not expecting, especially you get a negative when you're pretty sure you should be seeing a positive from this person, then it could just be a matter of too much water, too much dilution. And again, it doesn't necessarily prove intent, but it proves that you don't have a valid specimen, or you don't have a specimen that you really should rely on the results for, because that specimen is just iffy at best. All right, next on our list is oxidants. Along with oxidants, called something called PCC, which is pyridinium chlorochromate. We don't really hear much about it these days, but it's fun to say, and it's one of the first complicated terms I learned 20 years ago when I started this business, and I say it whenever I have an excuse now. But anyway, oxidants such as bleach. There's also oxidants in brands such as Urine Luck and in Stealth. And basically, the oxidizing agent, whether it be bleach or one of these other products, is there to try and destroy. Usually, it targets the THC molecule, or I should say the metabolite of THC molecule, and that way it can actually neutralize it, so it is not going to be picked up by an instant test. So a lot of these reasons they use oxidants is specifically targeting the THC. Same thing with the next one on our list. We've got nitrites, and that's basically another oxidizing agent used in a similar fashion to Urine Luck and Stealth. And this can be found in brands such as Clear and Wizzies. And then lastly, we have something called glutaraldehyde, and it's a foreign agent meant to disrupt the enzymes used in an EMIT test. So an EMIT, for those of you who aren't familiar, is basically like a desktop analyzer. It works in a similar methodology to an instant cup, but the liquid reagents will be affected by the glutaraldehyde. It will affect the results and possibly render results that should be positive into negative results. This substance is typically found in the brands Urinade and Clear Choice. Now, with the first three, we talked about dilution, and again, specimen validity more than adulteration. With these last three, that's adulteration. You're not supposed to see any oxidants in somebody's urine specimen at all. You're not supposed to see any glutaraldehyde. So, excuse me. So when you have positives or you have questionable results on these three, every indication is that the participant has done something with the intent to try and change the results of the test. So that's very important. So again, when we did the last adulterant webinar, I think that wasn't really a complaint, but one of the biggest requests was, I wish you would have showed us how to read them. And I get that. And I'm going to rectify that today for you guys. So what we're going to do today, I'm going to get my fancy assistant on with me, if he's willing to come out and join us today. There he is. There he is. Ta-da! It's me. Anyway, so what we're going to do today is I've got a couple of our cups here. This is also a little different when we did the live webinar on the 23rd. I used a separate adulteration strip, but after giving it more thought when it came time to record this, I thought most of you were using these cups, and it would make the most sense to show you how to read on these cups. Now, if you're using a different product to test for your adulterants, if you are using a separate adulteration strip, so let me get this without ruining my whole setup here. So these are basically individual adulteration strips or specimen validity tests. Yes, the camera's a little weird, but you got it. These so you can test the adulterant separately. In other words, if you suspect somebody of tampering, you could use one of these without having to waste a whole test cup. That way you get your adulterant first, and you know if the specimen is valid or not before you even waste a cup on it. So that is an option if you guys are interested. It's not that expensive in the big picture. The way we're going to test these today, and that's going to bring us to attachment number 2, is we're using a set of quality controls. So most of you who are in the healthcare space or are familiar with CLIA, you know a little bit about quality controls. So external quality controls are basically urine spiked, or so I should say, artificial urine, synthetic urine, spiked with known values of certain substances. So they have them for the drugs of abuse test, where you would use the positive on one of the cups and you would see all the strips on there come out positive. You would use a negative on another cup. You would see all the strips come out negative in a perfect world, because we know exactly what they put into these controls. So we know what to expect from the results. So that's similar to what we have here today. So we've got control A, and we've got control B, and we're going to run one on each cup, and we're going to make sure that the cup's functioning properly. And this also will give you a great read on what the colors mean and what they don't mean. Now, one last thing before we get started, two things I should say. Number one, the colors you're looking at on your monitor and this horrible printout of a scan, the colors aren't going to be 100% accurate. So when you are doing this at home, don't use the handout. This is more for demonstration purposes. Really, you want to use the printed color cards that come in each box of tests. Or if you're going to be using the separate adulterant strip, they have it on the label on the bottle itself. So they should be close, but there's so many different printers, there's so many different monitors. Or rather, you use use the one that came in the box of cups. That way, we know the color is accurate, and it will help you. Second part of that is we're not looking at a digital readout. When we look at the creatinine, we're not seeing nice readout that says 21 milligrams per deciliter. We're going to use some judgment here. And if you're looking at a color and you can't quite tell if it's lighter than this cream or darker than this cream, again, with the creatinine especially, you're pretty diluted already. You're down near the 20 milligrams per deciliter compared to the 140 or so average that we talked about before. So keep that in mind. You're not going to get it exact. Really, you're looking to see if it's within a hair's breadth of the color that you're hoping it's going to be. And it's the nature of an instant test. It's what we call semi-quantitative. Same thing with like alcohol tests, give you like a level range. You just won't get that fancy printout. And we can get that from the lab for you, of course, but it kind of defeats the purpose of having an on-site test and knowing right away whether or not you're using a valid specimen. All right, so let's go ahead and use the first one. We're going to go ahead and open up one of our cups. If you guys have been with us a while, you should recognize our now world-famous purple lids. I'm going to go ahead and peel off the privacy panel. So I need to cheat and remember what order these adulterants are in. Oh, yeah, I'll be needing my glasses here in a second. So the instructions in the separate adulteration strip, and if you train with me at all about using the cups themselves, you know my rule. You want to read the adulterants at about the 3 to 4 minute mark. You can read them earlier. According to the instructions, for example, on the individual strips, it says to read between 1 and 4 minutes. So with the cup, if you remember my instructions, you're getting the cup, you're reading the temperature strip first, and then you're going to go back and read the adulterant after that. So that might be at the 1 minute mark, might be at the 3 minute mark. You're still fine. You want to make sure you read it within yet 4 minutes, and then that leaves you 1 minute to let the rest of the test develop. Now, I don't think I've used these controls before on our cup, so I honestly don't know what to expect from the strips, but we're not going to really focus on that because this is more about just the 2 adulteration strips that we've got here. And, hopefully we'll be able to get it done without too much glare. All right, so let's go ahead and just dump the whole A in here. Put the lid back in. And listen, I'm going to cheat because I'm not testing anybody's real specimen, so I'm allowed to cheat as far as I'm concerned. So I'm not going to wait the full minute. I'm just going to grab my readers and try to remember which order these panels are in, and then we can read them as we go. Hopefully that'll be enough time. And we can see just from the other strips that the liquid's already migrating up these strips. So we got our wicking. We're probably fine. Again, at home, please do wait the full, the full one, at least the 1 minute. And I know I say at home, but you know what I mean. Please do wait at least the whole minute. All right, so the first one on the upper left here, we have is nitrites. And yeah, I don't think you guys are ever going to get like a crisp camera view, but you can kind of see the colored pad here. I'll try and keep the glare off it. So nitrites looks pretty much just off white. And if we look at our chart here, we see nitrites just off white equals negative. And then if we look back to attachment 2 to the controls, and we see for controls on nitrites, they say control A should be negative. So good, we see that. And that color matches a negative on that parameter. Next, we have the glutaraldehyde, which is this one here. And again, this is where the color is going to be tricky for us. Yeah, and again, you might not be able to see it, but that's a pretty dark purple. And again, this printout may not be great, but it's definitely darker than this. Definitely closing in on this here. So if we look at our chart again from attachment 2, and we look to the glutaraldehyde, we see that this specimen should be glutaraldehyde positive. And I would say that purple does indeed indicate that. All right, next one on the bottom here, we have creatinine. And it looks to me like the creatinine didn't even change color at all. It looks, lighter than this, probably as light as that or that. So we, again, look to our attachment 2, and we see creatinine was supposed to be negative. Good, so this is functioning good so far. Next on top, we have oxidants. And yeah, oxidants would have turned a shade of blue or dark blue if it had been present. So we're definitely looking at a negative here. And according to our attachment 2, good, it should be negative. Next, we move on to our specific gravity, and we look at the specific gravity. It starts green. If it gets below that, it turns blue, and then it turns gold. If it gets above that, it turns super gold. It's probably not even a real color. And we can see we're pretty much still pretty dark green here. Not quite there, but around here probably. And if we look at our chart, we see that specific gravity is 1.005. So yeah, we're close. It's right around this color here. And again, you can almost tell. I mean, camera's not too bad. Thanks for modern technology. And then lastly on our list, we have the pH. And this color to me looks like it's somewhere on the low end. It's definitely more golden than purple. I mean, than orange or red. And we refer to our chart and we see that the pH is low abnormal. I'm sorry, it says low abnormal. And actually, I don't know if I agree. Again, my eyes, it looks closer to 4 than 3. But again, this is just a horrible printout from my printer. So we'll have to take that one with a grain of salt. So let's go ahead and read the other cup as well. And maybe it'll give us some new insight into some other colors we should be looking for. Go ahead and open this up. I guess I could have opened these before I started recording. Sorry about that, guys. Go ahead and peel away the privacy panel, save us some time, and we'll go ahead and dump in the B solution. Excuse me. Put the lid on so I don't make a mess. Nice click there. All right, we're going to wait until the strips have started migrating a little further than this. A little more wicking would be better just to make sure. Oh, by the way, we'll wait for that in case you were curious. Yeah, everything looks pretty negative. Some of them didn't read properly, but there wasn't a ton of, these vials aren't very full. So that makes sense to me. All right, that should be good. Again, please wait at least the 1 full minute when you're doing this, in your office. I'm only cheating here for the sake of saving you guys some time so you don't have to hit fast forward on me. All right, so here we're going to start again with the nitrites. The nitrites, this color to me looks way, way dark, at least close to this color. If we look on our list, again, going back to attachment 2, where we know the controls are supposed to be, nitrites are listed as positive, and that we can see. That's definitely a dark color. That's definitely a positive. Next one on the list is glutaraldehyde. Glutaraldehyde, we can see, goes from this little more red in it to a little more dark purple in it. And again, you have to keep an eye. You'll have to take my printer in along with it with a grain of salt. So on here, it looks like the glutaraldehyde is probably a little further up this way, but I'm going to just chalk that up to the print job. So according to the controls, that should be negative for the glutaraldehyde. All right, next we're looking at the creatinine. And yeah, I should have probably waited. It looks like these didn't get saturated properly, so please bear with me. Next, we're looking at the creatinine level on this strip here, and you can't really make it out. It looks like it got smeared or it's not quite coming in all the way, and that was really just me jumping the gun, so I apologize for that. What it's supposed to read is plus or 90, above 90 milligrams per deciliter. The part that is starting to color in a little bit, I'm probably not going to be able to get that focus for you guys. I can see that purple is pretty much what we were looking for that panel. Okay, next on the list is the oxidants. And according to the control list, we've got positive for oxidants. Let's see if our color pans out. Remember, our negative was almost that color white. So yeah, we're looking way up here. I agree. That is definitely a positive result for the oxidants. Next, we've got specific gravity. Specific gravity is, let's take a look. This one looks pretty high. It looks like it's at least that goldenrod color. And according to our controls list, yes, it's high abnormal. Yeah, I would almost put that as abnormal. But again, I'm working off this printout, so please be patient. And then lastly, we've got the pH level. pH looking pretty green here. Looks near an 8 to me. According to the controls, it should be a 9 or greater. So if we had probably let this saturate correctly instead of me trying to not keep you guys here forever, we would have had a proper color on that one. So again, it's not perfect. Even me sitting here, demonstrating it for you, it's a little hard to tell. You can't quite tell if it's one thing or the other. The good news is a lot of these things will happen in conjunction with one another. If you're going to see a low creatinine value, you're probably going to see a low specific gravity as well. And then back to my first point, which I'll probably make a million more times the longer you stay with me. get your baselines. Start paying attention to the way what their specimens look like. And if you're using this cup and you can't find time to look at all 6 adulterants, please at least look at the creatinine value, because that sometimes is enough to tell you whether or not you're testing a valid specimen, and it could explain why you did or did not get the result that you were hoping to get. Thank you guys. Listen, I apologize for not having recorded the original. Some things just happen that way. But please do take the time to watch this video and share it. And until next time, keep on testing.